right. I think we're starting a little bit early, but I did just want to thank all of you for being here. First of all, I know that this takes you away from your other duties, your other things, and it's really good to be able to fill a room with people who care to hear my message. I am Clark Elliott. I'm the conservation manager at DWA. So, Desert Water Agency, we're really focused on conservation, and we're hoping to spread the message through the kind of work that you do as well. So just a little bit of housekeeping on the top. There are notepads on your desk. There's pens in the bags. So if you want to take any notes during the presentation, if you would like to, you're more than welcome. If you'd like to ask questions during the presentation, you can. I will be trying to repeat them. As you heard, we're recording me, so we will be going forward with that and hopefully posting this online. I also want to mention that this is in the early stages. If any of you are working with HOAs and they are concerned about, for example, AB 1572 or DWA's Ordinance 80, we are currently planning in the very early stages of doing a separate workshop for those HOA members. It will likely be at a bigger venue than this, but that will be for them to get a little bit more familiar with some of these regulations coming up, and we're trying to be very transparent about what is going to happen and how it's going to affect them. So we're shooting, or at least I'm shooting, to have that in late January, early February of 2026. So hopefully we'll get that information out there pretty soon coming up here. I do want to very quickly call out Mission Springs Water District. So they serve this water supply over at the Desert Hot Springs area. So if you have any particular concerns over in that area or you have questions for them, you are more than welcome to talk to them. They can at least get you to the right person. And I do want to quickly call out Paul Ortega. He is our president of our board of directors, and he is our local representative for our elected officials. So with that, thank you for being here at our landscaper workshop. And I am going to go ahead and hand it off initially to our general manager, Esther Sines. She's going to give you a little bit of background about DWA, and then I'll get in kind of the meat of the presentation about what we offer in the conservation space.
Thank you, Clark. Well, thank you. First of all, thank you all for being here today. We really appreciate you taking the time out of your busy schedules to come join us to learn a little bit more of our efforts here and how we can partner with you. You know, conservation going forward we're going to need a big push, especially in our area where we have some hefty targets that we have to meet. And I know Mission Springs does as well. So it's going to be incredibly important that we partner with each and every one of you in order to meet those goals that we have. And they're not just goals that we internally have, there's goals that are set for us by the state. So we do need to manage the precious resource of water, and it is great to be able to partner with you all to do that. So a little bit about DWA. First have to figure out how to work these things. Okay. DWA, we were formed in 1961 as a groundwater management agency. Over time, we have kind of added to our portfolio of services. In 1968, we acquired 2 different water districts here within the Palm Springs and Cathedral City area, and thus began providing retail water service. So you'll hear us say potable or tap water, but really the water that just comes out of the tap and also is majority used for irrigating as well on our residential landscapes. And in addition to that groundwater replenishment that we do, we provide that potable water service, recycled water service, and wastewater service. I like to think of it as the life cycle of water, where we are importing water for use here, we are recharging it into the ground, it's being produced and getting used at our homes and businesses, and then we're collecting it again so that it can be treated with our partner facilities, and then it comes back to us and we treat it even more to provide recycled water and then we serve that yet again for reuse, so we can avoid using groundwater or tap water for irrigating large landscapes such as our golf courses and parks and medians. So that provides a lot of savings, about 70% less electricity in order to recycle rather than repump that water. So that's an important effort that we have. We are governed by an elected board of 5 individuals, as you had previously been introduced to our board president, Paul Ortega, which I would like to mention. He is a landscaper. He's in the landscape space as well. So everybody in this room has representation on our board for those interests too. Can we move to the next one? What did I do? A brief pause in your, I don't know what I did. Okay, I'm going to stop touching this, and then I'll just let you know when next slide. Could you go to the next slide, please? Okay. Desert Water Agency, our jurisdictional area is about 325 square miles, and that's indicated by this blue area, this blue line. Now you'll see that we have the different cities that we overlap our boundary with. We provide services to Palm Springs, Cathedral City, a little bit of Cathedral City, very little bit of Rancho Mirage, and Desert Hot Springs. We do not provide all of our services in all of these areas. Mission Springs Water District is a sister agency, and they serve the city of Desert Hot Springs, but we do provide the recharge of the groundwater in that area. But our majority of our services happen in Palm Springs and a little bit of Cathedral City, where we offer kind of our full slate of services. And in addition to that, we also have some unincorporated areas. Next slide, please. So I've talked a little bit about who we serve already, but we, as I mentioned before, we acquired 2 water companies in order to provide water service to the city of Palm Springs and Cathedral City. And in that area, we service about 75,000 people in that potable or residential service area, retail service area, with about 24,000 active water service connections. And I did mention we also provide wastewater service, so that's the collection and conveyance of that wastewater. We provide that service to about 2,300 sewer connections in the Cathedral City areas. And of our potable water, we produce about 29,000 acre feet per year. And so that equates to about 9.5 billion gallons of potable water each year. And now that's a lot of water that is just produced within our service area that we provide. And that is what DWA provides for retail water service, but there's other pumpers out there. So there's more water that is being produced. Now our area, we're in the desert. We know that. We know that because we are landscaping for these desert conditions, and it does take a lot of water. And with that, we don't naturally produce that much water here. It's not naturally occurring. So that's why, again, getting back to why DWA was originally formed, was groundwater management, to make sure we have enough groundwater, not just for our uses today, but in the future, to make sure we have enough water here for generations to come. And so that comes in many forms. It's using it wisely, but also obtaining and importing water supplies from outside of the valley to bring it here into the Coachella Valley. So to be able to provide that 29,000 acre feet plus, it does take efforts to bring water into this valley. Moving on to the next slide. So our water supplies, I've already touched on the imported water, but we also have the natural occurring groundwater, and that's where a majority of our water is actually produced from. So we're artificially recharging that groundwater so that we can then produce it out of the groundwater. We do also have some surface water from Chino Creek, Falls Creek, and Snow Creek, as well as there's some naturally occurring water from the Whitewater River as well. That all comes into the valley. It's either captured and used in some of our smaller satellite potable water system and non-potable water systems, And also what is not captured is then returned to the ground that we can then later use. And then we also do have our recycled water too. Moving on, we have in our water delivery system, we have approximately 27 active wells. We do have some other ones, but active ones are 27. We have 25 reservoirs that have about 60 million gallons of capacity. And there's a note here that that's about as much to provide water to 245 homes in a year. So that's just how much capacity we have after it comes out of the ground and it's in the storage in the reservoirs. That's that 245 homes or 60 million gallons. But granted, in the ground, it is our largest reservoir in our aquifer where we have a substantial amount of water. In order to service our customers, we have over 400 miles of pipeline, about 425 miles of pipeline. And we also have 2 groundwater replenishment facilities. We have one that Desert Water Agency owns and operates in the Mission Creek Subbasin, so that's up in Desert Hot Springs. And then we also have another one that our sister agency, Coachella Valley Water District, owns and operates in where the windmill area is in Windy Point. So that's our West Whitewater recharge facility, and we have cooperative management agreements because we do exist in a shared space of this valley. It is not just one agency and we have our own area, but that water in the aquifer, it flows freely between in the sub-basins. So we cooperatively manage them together and help to recharge them together because we are both using that water. So we both own and operate facilities that we both use. And we also have a filtration plant that's up at Snow Creek. So that is one of our surface water sources that we collect and treat that water, as well as one recycling water plant. And that concludes my introduction on about just high-level overview of Desert Water Agency, who we serve and what services we provide. And I would like to pass it back off to Clark.
All right, so this is sort of how I table set conservation a lot of the time. So if you need help getting yourself oriented here, so this is the Sierra Nevada mountains. And like all good stories, it starts about hundreds of miles away from where we actually are. But this is where we have our water rights, where we actually determine how much water we can import. We have Lake Tahoe up here, and going kind of into the corner here, you start to get to the Bakersfield area. So you're talking about a really wide swath of snow and water. What this is trying to show you is that this is over the last few years. So there was no 2025 map that I can find, unfortunately, but over the last few years, you can kind of see that how much snow actually accumulates over here varies wildly. So 2022 being a bad year, that was when we were in drought. 2023 being kind of a drought busting year. So you can see that there's just a huge difference in the amount of available water. And in California, we kind of have to deal with that variability due to our weather conditions here. So what does that actually mean? So we have a quite complicated system here in California of moving water to different areas. So we have pipelines, aqueducts, everything, and we don't actually draw that water from the Sierra Nevadas. We draw it from the Colorado River Aqueduct because it runs right through our valley. And we have to have a trading agreement in order to make that happen. So we trade with Metropolitan Water District. They give us water gallon for gallon, and we create a nice cohesive system that hopefully prevents us from having to spend a significant amount of money to extend the state water project beyond where it currently ends. So all of the snow, all of that gives us what we call an allocation, how much water we're actually going to be allowed to use. 2023 actually, so that big drought year or big snow year, gave us 100% allocation. And that was the first time we'd had that since 2006. There were, I will say, I had some conversations when I was starting my career in the LA area. There were definitely conversations that we would never have 100% allocation again. And then we had a historically wet year. This last year was 50% of the average. So we are sort of, I want to say, in a different situation. So it kind of didn't really, I will say, carry over very much. In the current years, we're sort of seeing a little bit less snow, a little bit less, and that does mean that sometimes our reservoirs start to get strained. We start to see the early stages of a drought. This year could end up being very wet and put that off for a few more years, but we do see drought being very cyclical here in California. So allocation for 2026, we don't know yet, but they typically get announced in late November, early December, and then they slowly increase as we get more rain going through January, February, March, and April tends to be where they cap out. So all of that to say, this wild, wet weather, everything that happens in California has contributed to a lot of legislative and regulatory talk about how we as water suppliers and how our customers are meant to be conserving. Part of that has been these two major rules. So making conservation a California way of life is a regulation that the state of California passed in response to some legislation. And essentially it is setting a budget for us. So we are getting a budget as the water agency. As of right now, we're projecting to be well over our budget going into 2040. So we're quite well over it, and that's part of the reason that we are using something like AB 1572 to sort of get people to get on the same page as far as conservation. AB 1572, on the other hand, is maybe the one that you might hear more about. If you don't mind, I'm actually going to take a second. Is anyone here representing an HOA? Is that your normal customer base or commercial customers? Okay. Is the rest residential or is that not right? Okay. Excuse me. Are you mostly doing so? Are you mostly doing residential for the remainder of the group here? Okay, commercial. Okay, mostly commercial. Excuse me. All right. I apologize. That was a little bit of a tangent, but so we are facing AB 1572. It is going to be banning some of that non-functional turf. We're going to get a little bit into what that actually means, but we also were required by that law to pass our own ordinance, Ordinance 80. That is laying out how we are actually going to enforce it. So we do have that available now. I'll get a little bit into the details of that, but I'm not going to dive too deep into it during this presentation. And then we, of course, have some local restrictions that are always in place. So those are things that are like no broken sprinklers. You have to fix them if they break. No watering after rain. Sort of meant to be no nonsense kind of stuff, but those are always in place. So if we see it, those could potentially lead to some penalties. Getting a little bit into the detail on the first one here, making conservation a California way of life. So it is setting a budget for us. So we are asked to take our indoor usage. So the state is essentially giving us a calculation. They're saying this is how much we think you should use indoors. This is how much we think you should use outdoors. And they're also counting CII outdoor. So excuse me, that's commercial properties, outdoor usage. Water loss, that's the water that we lose through our pipes as the water agency. And then variances are the most significant variance for us is our seasonal population. So they give us a little bit of credit for that. The bonus would be if we were serving you back recycled water through your tap. We don't do that, and not a lot of agencies do. But all of those budgets together end up with us, again, well over our budget. Not by 10%, not by 20%, but probably by a little bit more than either of those. So we are, I will say, feeling the pressure on that and projecting to be about 40% over, but I think that we might be able to get that down a little bit as we get better data to the state. So we are required to work towards meeting that budget, and that's a lot of why this conversation is happening and why we're being very serious about some of these water conservation goals. This is sort of the big one, and I don't know if you're hearing a lot about this, but you will be soon if you're not. So this is getting into non-functional turf. We are required by the state to have our water customers be in compliance, water customers subject to compliance shall not use potable water from the agency's domestic water supply to irrigate non-functional turf areas. So when we are talking about, and there will be more slides on this, but when we're talking about applicable subject water customers, you're really talking about HOA common areas, so they have a deadline of January 1st, 2029. Commercial areas, they have a deadline of January 1st, 2028. And then governmental areas, I don't think there's a lot of governmental customers in here, but they have the earliest deadline of January 1, 2027. So that is going to make us basically have to respond to this, that we did that through our ordinance. That lays out this penalty structure for not following it. It also lays out this self-certification. So I'll get a little bit into what those will actually look like, but we're in the early stages, hoping to have that ready on our website again early next year. So single family homes and turf areas irrigated with recycled water are excluded. We didn't do that because we decided that, but they were excluded from the legislation. So in the initial law, they kind of ignored the single family homes and the areas irrigated with recycled water. So because the question when we bring up non-functional turf always tends to be what is non-functional turf, I'm trying to give you some examples that are at least going to be helpful. So we're going to start with functional turf. So these are areas that are regularly used to provide a recreational benefit to the community or property, are an essential part of a commercial service or operation, provide reasonable spacing and safe access, and have a history of programmed events, past, present, future, or their future installation of turf that meets the requirements. So sort of obvious ones, I guess, would be like a sports field. You know, this is the Palm Springs Athletic Field. They're playing football on it. They're playing whatever they play on it. It's all, you know, it's all designed and meant to be used for that. It's used the majority of the year. Dedicated dog area. So this is an area where people are bringing their dogs. They're regularly using it. It's a busy area. Golf course. So typically use recycled water, to be honest with you. But even if they didn't, it is a dedicated commercial area where they are designed to be using grass. That doesn't mean that there won't be conversations about what grass is absolutely necessary for that course versus not. But the real concern there tends to be the major fairways. Those are required for the game. Recycled water. So this is a recycled water area. Everything in that pond there is recycled water. So that is excluded. You can see the downtown park there. It doesn't look like it sees a lot of use, but I've actually been there. They see use on that and that have events there. So that is something that would qualify as functional. And then you can kind of see an event space there where we're all having an event. Essentially, we're just trying to show that you need to actually be utilizing these areas to be functional. So these are some examples of maybe non-functional turf areas. So these are sort of smaller areas, and there tend to be strips of grass that are just kind of willy-nilly. They're not exactly going to be, you know, used for the football game or anything like that. They're just not big enough for that kind of thing. And I will also say that all of these are places where they've applied for our grass removal program. To me, an indication, if you're thinking about applying for the grass removal program, is that you're probably not utilizing that grass a whole lot. So this is sort of a starting place of, these are areas that aren't seeing a lot of use. They're kind of separated out from the most of the property, and they're really not ever going to see a use that would be called functional, because how do you actually utilize these areas regularly? So getting a little bit into the deadlines here. So these are kind of what I mentioned at the top, is all of these deadlines. That said, very important on the next line is that you're also going to have a self-certification deadline 6 months before these. So on our website, we are going to put up a self-certification form, and it will essentially be up to the actual property to define what is functional. We don't have the resources at this point to actually go out there to essentially to, we don't have the resources to go out there and decide what is functional or non-functional for every single case. We are putting the burden a little bit back on our customers and essentially saying, you live in these areas, you work in these areas, and hopefully you know better than us what's actually being used for a functional purpose versus not. There will be the potential that those self-certification forms can be denied if you're completely in outer space as far as what is not, what is functional versus non-functional. You could reapply, but we do need to have those 6 months before your actual deadline. They are, again, meant to be sort of helpful for us in determining what is then non-functional in the property and what we could enforce against. So there would be a potential penalty both for not submitting the self-certification form. That would cap out, it would progressively go up, but it would cap out at $500 a month because, again, this is how we want to be able to enforce this. And there's also a penalty for then continuing to water turf that you defined as non-functional. And that caps out at $2,000 potentially up to every 3 days. So we have to verify the violation. But that said, we are pretty serious about this because we want to be on the same page. If we have both decided that what is functional versus non-functional, we then don't want to see continued watering of that non-functional turf. I will say that that penalty structure doesn't immediately go to $2,000 a day. We'll work with you in the interim, but that is meant to be a discouraging factor of the people who don't want to take out their grass, but they can't find a functional use for it. If you want to keep that grass in an HOA in a business, find some functional uses for it and essentially make sure that you know where you're actually, what the grass is actually important to the property. I'm trying to make sure I didn't forget anything. Absolutely. So the question was about the deadline and what it means for essentially grass that is still in place, but you may be planning to take it out or you may be behind. So the answer to that question is essentially, first of all, part of why we're telling you now is that we want you to be proactive wherever you can to start taking it out now. And the second part of that is that this regulation does not require you to actually replace the grass. It requires you to stop watering it. So the hard part is going to be that, yes, there is the potential that you just simply stop watering it and it does eventually start to die because of that. So there is no technical, to me, and I know this is maybe a little bit harsh, but there is no technical deadline as far as when you can turn off the water. There is a deadline on when you can actually convert it. If you would like to take advantage of a grass removal program in the interim, we do have our rebate, our incentive for that. And essentially that rebate is going to help with some of that. If you want to get in early, we're trying to get the word out there at least a few years early so that you're able to make better plans. Did that answer it, or do you still have questions?
Well, so when we self-certify, so when we self-certify 6 months, so then let's say June 2028, we're saying where our functional turf is, right? And everything else is non-functional. So you guys aren't going to come and look and say, okay, this area is turf. I guess what I'm trying to say is, like, it sounds like to me you're saying at that 6 month point we have to stop watering non-functional turf. That's really the only thing we really has to happen.
So no. So I guess I will say at the 6 month point, the only thing you have to do is submit that self-certification form. The actual deadline is here. So you have to stop watering it at that stage. I would recommend for the people in this room, especially, that you are proactive wherever you can and that you're an advocate, especially for some of these communities that are a little bit resistant. I will say some water agencies are finding themselves in the position that they don't feel the need to enforce this the same way that we are, but we are planning to enforce it, and I don't want people to be caught flat-footed when we actually do send out penalties. Any other questions before we move on? All right, perfect. Thank you. Okay, so what are we doing to help? I will say that that is all of the kind of dour news, or more potentially changing things news. I will say that we are really trying to be advocates, really trying to help you wherever we can. Part of that is that we are doing what we call a water walkthrough for commercial and HOA properties. Essentially, these are meant to look at your water use, look at some of these areas that you think might still have questions about what is functional versus non-functional, provide you some better guidance about what you can actually do. So we will go out there, we'll go out there with graphs, we'll go out there with water use history, we'll talk about what we think LACT actually looks like out there, where you might need more focus. I'm going to say that I'm almost positive some of the people in this room have been along with us. So if you are finding them useful, if you feel like they're good, let us know. If there's things that you want to see changed, or you're not really sure that, if there's things that you think could be improved, I'm welcome to feedback. So we are trying to get these out there and trying to help people out wherever we can. I will say that we've been a little bit slow because I'm currently the only person in conservation, so it is hard for me to be out there and everywhere at once. But if you're interested, you can email us at conservation@dwa.org, and that is the best way to sort of coordinate these. We'll go out there, we'll ask you what you're really focused on. Maybe it's non-functional turf, maybe it's finding more conservation opportunities or rebates, and get you some good information, some good presentation, and walk the actual site so that we're all on the same page. So this is a little bit about what these actually look like. So maybe not the prettiest graphs, but essentially we're trying to look at where you're ranking as far as, hey, in the past few years, you might have used this much compared to some other HOAs. Maybe you're saving water, maybe you're using a little bit more. What does it look like to continue to save? All of those sorts of things. So trying to get people in the right mindset for conservation. So one thing we're also kind of trying to focus on, and this graph is a little bit crowded, but essentially is this curve. So, down here, July and August are always typically just about the hottest months. And we expect to use more water then. But we're also potentially looking for other patterns, for example, like here in November. So you kind of see those spikes pretty typically. As you probably all know, that's the typical overseeding time. We're just here to at least mention to those HOAs, we're always trying to discourage overseeding where we can, especially from the conservation perspective. But we want HOAs to also understand, what does that mean when our water use all of a sudden spikes up? Over the course of our whole service area, we probably see November is kind of has unseasonably high water use. If it matched the season of what we expect, we'd probably save 3 to 4% of our total water use for the whole year. So it's not nothing. Just when we overseed, it's a lot of water, just being honest. But looking for other patterns, other things that may be happening. Sometimes in individual meters, you can even see things like leaks, like breaks, and dive down into what might be causing some issues on the property regarding water use. This is my little plug. If you would interested in skipping overseeding, so we see that overseeding, again, is a pretty big water user. We are always going to recommend that you skip it. During droughts, we also actively recommend you skip it, so you're going to see a lot more outreach during that time. But essentially, when we have properties that are interested in doing that, we do give them yard signs. We might put them on our website. We might do a little bit more time and effort to kind of let them know that, hey, thank you for doing this. It's important to us, and we're glad it's important to you too. All right. So this is sort of a third, I will say, regulation. It's a little bit older than the two I mentioned, the Making Conservation a California Way of Life and the Ordinance 80. But this is regarding the Model Water Efficient Landscape Ordinance, or MWELO. So the state during the last drought, so the 2015 to 2016 drought, when that peaked, was working on this landscape ordinance. So they have since 1993 or so had some kind of landscape ordinance. When they are working on this, all of a sudden they realized, oh, we're in a drought and we really need to focus on this. And they did a really comprehensive pass at it during that time. And it's kind of changed how we do, especially new development and redevelopment. So when we are looking at those types of properties, there is a whole calculation that you need to do to ensure that the water use of the property is what we expect it to be. This really falls more on some of our local land use planning agencies. So us as the water agency, we're not typically really involved with this, except maybe for new development. But for more redevelopment, it tends to be that the cities, so cities and county tend to be our land use agencies. They're much more involved in this. We will provide guidance if they needed it, but we don't get asked a whole lot for redevelopment usually. But this is a pretty important factor, and why, a lot of the time people will say, like, new development, it's coming in, it's using all the water. Typically, new development uses a lot less water than the old development, and part of that is this. I also want to mention that we weren't able to get any planning agencies here, but if you are interested or if you find that you need more background on that, the planning agencies at the City of Palm Springs, City of Cathedral City, County of Riverside might be able to help you and be a little bit more, give you a little bit more guidance about what they're expecting for some of these renovated properties. Okay, so now we're going to start in on our rebates. So all of our rebates are available to all of our customers. We are working on, so essentially smart controllers are, I'm going to explain something that you all probably already know to you, but they're Wi-Fi capable weather sensing. They're going to at least kind of read the weather, get a sense of, hey, July is hotter than January. Hey, if we're expecting rain with enough certainty, we may just turn off. Have a lot of cool features. I will say that we do see that just having the Wi-Fi controller saves a pretty decent amount of water, especially when they're programmed correctly, which is part of what we rely on this group for. But they are going to essentially be, I will say, we cover quite a good portion of this. So if you keep your receipts for a residential property, we max out at $150 for the device and $100 for the install. For a commercial property, it's a little bit more complicated, but we max out at $10,000 and then $750 for the install. And that's because some of those commercial controllers, first of all, are a little bit more hefty, a little bit more expensive, and sometimes those agencies need multiple controllers over the course of their whole property. So we are trying to get these out there where they make sense and trying to make sure they're properly programmed where we can. If you have any questions in particular about this one, of course, reach out to us or you can ask them now. But yeah, this is a pretty good program for us, and we're hopeful that you continue to take advantage of it. So I also want to talk about nozzles and irrigation heads. So we are also, where we can, and where there are efficient nozzles and irrigation heads that you are taking out, trying to incentivize those. Again, this one comes pretty close to covering the cost, although I know those have been going up recently. But those are $5 per nozzle and $2 per install. Residential customers are up to 100 nozzles. Commercial customers are up to 1,000 nozzles. I will say for that 1,000 nozzles for commercial customers, if you have one that is way over that, just let us know. For very large properties, we have worked with properties in the past. We just need to know that you're going to apply for way more than 1,000 nozzles. But we kind of try to balance it based on the actual property size. So based on the property size, we will work with you. Maybe you need to split it, the project, but hopefully that gets you a lot closer to the way there and you're not doing them 1,000 at a time for no reason. Again, keep those receipts. One thing I will say for this group is the more clear you are on what the cost of the device is and what the cost of your labor is, the easier for us, to be honest with you. I feel like a lot of the time, maybe not for this particular group of people, but a lot of the time we ask them to split out that labor and the cost of the device just because it makes it much more clear for us of what we're incentivizing versus what we're not. These are just some examples of ones that we have kind of pre-approved, ones that we will incentivize no matter what, but just gives you an idea. These are on our website on that main page. For all of our incentives, you can go to our website at dwa.org/save, then just select the incentive you're interested in. I will say I know a lot of the time, or at least it feels like a lot of the time, that this group will actually be the ones applying for the incentives, and the customers aren't as comfortable with the application process. So we are trying to make this easy for you. Okay. Any questions as we are going through? No worries. Okay. So this kind of gets to our meat and potatoes program. This tends to be, I will say, our by far most popular program and by far the most program that disperses the most amount of money to the community. This is not the only slide on it. I've got about 10 slides on grass removal, excuse me, but this was one where we really want to make sure that everyone's on the same page because there's a lot of money on the line for people. So right now, our grass removal program is at $2 per square foot. And there is an additional partnership with the city of Palm Springs for $1 per square foot while that money is available. When that money runs out, we'll have the conversation with them, but no guarantees that that money lasts forever. So you must apply and get approved before removing grass. There's a whole slide on that later, but just FYI for you, that is the most important rule. We have to see the grass with our own staff. We cannot trust any pictures or anything like that. The reason for that is really grant related for us. So the grants require these really strict documentation of exactly what happened on the property. And we need to be able to show that there was grass there before you got approved for our program. HOA, commercial, and institutional. So that's a kind of complicated thing, but essentially any businesses require city planning review and approval. We are trying to work a little bit closer with our cities and essentially give them involved, and we're trying again to streamline the process. I realize if some of you in here don't know, it has been a little bit of a challenge for some of us to get through those projects. I did have a separate meeting with the city of Palm Springs Sustainability and Planning. They seem to be on the same page about the long-term goal of making this a little bit smoother and hopefully easing some of these things in the near future. For example, I think they've dropped some fees. I think that they were really receptive of the idea of having some templates and some ideas. If there's things that you guys think would be helpful to make that process easier, keep me updated. I will keep them updated, and hopefully we can get to a better place regarding some of those planning review processes. No maximum or minimum square footage to qualify. So we are looking for any grass, doesn't really matter as long as it's worth it to you, we will work with you. I will say the most we've done at any one time is about 100,000 square feet. If you're way over that, maybe let me know first because it's a lot to hold on to that money for. So if you don't know, for our program, as soon as you're approved, we're essentially reserving that money for you. And we end up reserving it for quite a while for some of these larger projects. So may be good in that case if you're starting to get to be a lot to think about phasing through the project. One thing I want to mention too is that Palm Springs has at least said to me verbally, and you can get their own Palm Springs planning rather, has said to me verbally that they would be receptive to getting projects into one big group. So essentially, if you wanted to do a whole property at one time, you could, and then you could still phase it out with our program. So that might be a way to make things a little bit smoother. And then this is, again, just laying out that we have to be able to see the grass. So that final bullet point is just a little bit harping on the idea that grass must be present before DWA performs the pre-inspection. So we have to be able to see that grass there. No go. Essentially, you just don't get money. I only say this and I harp on it because there are a handful and sometimes two handfuls of people who, despite us saying that almost every time we bring this up, don't get the news, and then they're told they don't get money. They're usually not happy, and they're usually not happy with me. So
Just to interject here, well, Clark is absolutely correct. This has been kind of our largest program. I mean, we've spent over $2.5 million to date on this program, but I just want to highlight that please apply and encourage your customers to apply whenever funding is available, because while this has been a program that we've funded extensively in the past and have current funding for it right now, and we go and we try and get grant funding whenever possible, we're also putting our agency dollars, so really our customers' dollars, into this program as well for this conservation incentive, but that doesn't mean the same level of funding is always going to be available. That's a policy decision that our board makes every year. So it's important that when the funding is there to apply, because we do have hefty targets to make. And so we want to get to meet those as soon as possible, but also we want to provide as much benefit as we can when we can. So
yeah. And just adding on to what Esther said, if you ever want to stat or if you're interested in it, we do see this is a very successful program, and we actually ran a conservation study on this that said we save up to 67 gallons per square foot per year. That may not sound like a lot, but when you're replacing grass and replacing it at the scale we are, it ends up being quite a significant amount of actual water savings. And to be honest with you, yes, it makes everything easier in the conservation world when people are on board with the kind of programs we're running. Okay. This is that slide I warned you about where I say that, yes, grass must be present. This is, again, maybe the only rule that is an absolute no. No, I mean, if the grass isn't there when we go out there, the answer is going to be no. So to qualify, you have to have that grass present at our inspection. Once you've applied, we are going to call you, email you, try to get that inspector out there. If you feel like it's been a while and they haven't called us, you don't just get the go ahead to start. You need to, give us a call, say, hey, what's happening? We will work with you. But again, inspector has to be out there. We have to be clear about that. And they have to then bring it back to the office, get us an approval. I'm not going to harp on that anymore. I probably have done it 5 times, but thank you for hearing me out. Does my grass qualify? So this is a little bit of a guide about we are willing to take green, gold, and dying grass. We will not take, dead grass where it's starting to show the dirt underneath it or anything like that. Just a relatively decent guide for you there on the picture. So you can kind of see those top 2 are probably more like what we're looking for. The bottom 2 more like not probably going to qualify. So we will take out dirt areas that we see at the inspection. There might be a little bit of a space between that second yellow photo and the third with the weeds there. But if it's close, we'll do our dangest based on what the inspector actually sees while they're out there. But there may be a space where you just don't get an incentive because we think it's dirt. If you want to send us out there, you can, but it could potentially end up being a waste of time. And every once in a while, we'll have ones that, they're marginal. But again, if you want to see us out there, more than happy to look at it. We've sent people out there. We've called people and been like, hey, this looks like dirt. And they're like, it really looks better in person. And we're like, okay, if you say so. But sometimes they're right and sometimes they're wrong. So rebate is really only for those grass areas. So the planters, the trees, all that kind of stuff potentially will end up not counting. Hardscape does not qualify. So we used to be a little bit more generous about this. This is one where that grant funding has been a bit of a challenge, especially on the state side. So they're really sensitive about these hardscape areas, the walkways, the pathways, all that kind of stuff, because it is a stormwater concern. So essentially, when it's raining, it creates more hard surfaces for that rain to potentially hit, it can cause flooding, all of that sort of stuff. Out in our area, where we honestly get very little rain, pending maybe today, may not be as much of a concern, but the state's been very sensitive about projects that don't add to the stormwater readiness of an area. So we've been a little bit more sensitive about taking out some of these areas where there's hardscape. So you can see they've done whatever. Here's the before and after photo. They've done a wonderful job. They have a beautiful patio now, and the veranda looks great, but most of that is not going to end up qualifying. Yeah. So even things like walkways will end up taking out usually, because unless there's a grand amount of space between them, we just can't guarantee that there's going to be a whole lot of water that sinks into the ground. Yeah, what's up?
I'm a little unfamiliar with the process about what plans you have to actually submit, right, to get this. But I could see that some areas of grass would be converted into a desert landscape, let's say with a gravel path through it. So are you saying that the gravel path or the concrete path would not qualify to get money back from?
So the gravel path, where there is permeability between the rocks, that's totally fine with us. So all of that kind of stuff, rocks, gravel, decomposed granite, any kind of path that you want to make of that kind of thing will work. The concrete has tended to be a challenge for us. So if you're making a concrete path, all of a sudden, yes, you're creating a slab where there is no real water sinking through in that area you put it down. That tends to be what actually gets deducted. So what would actually happen is that we're going to approve you for a certain amount, but not knowing your plan, because we don't actually ask for the plan at the beginning, we're going to deduct an amount at the end. Usually I end up calling people, letting them know they were already aware of it. They already knew. It's not a big concern, but it does happen. So there is a chance that you're going to get approved for an amount, and then depending on what you actually put in, it gets deducted, usually a small amount. So all grass must be on separate valves. So this is essentially just trying to show that, hey, we don't want desert landscape mixed with grass, because then you have to water it like it's grass. We want them to, wherever they can be actually separate. So if you're taking out grass in one area, separate the valve so that you're not also watering grass that you've left. If we notice that there is a potential for there being, non-separated valves. So for example, in this picture, it's a pretty great example of, hey, it's great that they put in this maybe a little bit lower water use hedge, but it's still being watered like it's grass. We will potentially tell you to turn it on, tell you have to replace and separate those valves out. So if you want to save yourself trouble beforehand, separate them before. One thing I do want to mention too is that for all of our projects, there we go. We do require some plant coverage. So we are essentially saying that we don't want just, rock front yards. We don't want rock front gate areas or anything like that. We do need some liveliness, some plant life. All of our projects, we're going to require plants. I will say that the most common reason that someone gets to their post inspection, or they let me know they're done, that I tell them, no, you're not, is there's no plants there. And I tell them, you have to do something, you have to replant, you have to whatever. I will say, the most common reason that someone would fail their post inspection, when I say fail, it's just send me a correction. But essentially, we are just trying to make sure that we are not dealing with areas that have no life in them. The rule is typically 50% plant coverage. It's probably a little bit more than you think. I will say that my intuition is usually that it's a little bit more dense than I think it should be. But when you're doing an actual plan, when you're submitting something to the city, it's also something that they'll check. So you don't have to worry about it excessively. I will also say that the 50% plant coverage, what I usually say is that no one goes out there with a tape measure and they figure out like, oh, this is exactly 50%. Probably 45% would get you covered, but 50% is the rule and it's sort of the guideline of what we're trying to do. If you have something, and I don't have a great example up here, where there's a tree with a great canopy, all of that canopy counts. If you have something where you've got a bush, it counts up to full maturity. So if it's a young bush and obviously doesn't look like what it's going to look like at the end, we're going to give you full maturity. It's not the matter of like, let's plant 50 plants in here to just say that we crossed a box. We're trying to work with you in a sensible way. So this gets a little bit into artificial turf. So we are usually recommending that you use artificial turf sparingly in a landscape. Part of that is that the city of Palm Springs on the sustainability side would really love to have very limited artificial turf. They are concerned about the oil essentially and that how it might affect the local environment. I will say on the DWA side, we are more than happy to take your artificial turf where you are replacing it. The only hindrance could be potentially if the grants start to not like artificial turf. I will say we've had a little bit less success on the state side and a little bit more success on the federal side for those grants. That said, the current attitude of our leadership has been that we are happy to have that and we'll work within reason to make it continue to happen. I will say that when I have that, however, nothing is finalized as of now. We had this exact same slide last year, so it's not like that's threatening or anything like that. It's just a matter of we don't really know what the future holds for artificial turf. It's seeming like they're maybe going a little bit harsher on it. The attitude here has been that we're happy to have it within reason. This goes back a little bit on that commercial side. So we are also requiring for some of these commercial larger projects, we say over 20,000 square feet, that you provide a little bit more information to us. So we just kind of want to make sure that there is a commitment from the HOA or the commercial site of what they are actually going to do. So we have, for example, board minutes or an approval from the CEO or something like that, proof of funding, landscape plan, quotes or bids, city approval. Excuse me. Those are just a few examples of things that we want. The reason that we have that is that once we start to get to that 20,000 square foot number, we're reserving quite a large amount of money for those projects. We just want some sense of, are you actually committed to finishing this project at the end of the day? So if you can start to get me a few of those things, we will probably end up giving you the go-ahead, but we probably need the majority of them in order to really start feeling good about the fact that you're on the same page as us. That said, all HOA and commercial projects must go through the city's planning review process. If you're talking about a really small one, there might be a less intensive process you need to go through. But essentially, we've been kind of asked to make sure that you are aware that all those HOA and commercial projects need some kind of planning review. If you're having trouble with planning review, you can always contact me. I can do my best, but I have, to be honest with you, not had a tremendous amount of success in getting them to streamline things right this very second. But they seem committed in the long term to helping out with that and making things easier for you guys, keeping in mind that we have these really harsh objectives. We're telling people to take out grass, and then it gets hard with the city potentially on these reviews. Yeah, I don't know if that's helpful. I'm in your court. I am trying to make these things easier. It's been a process. One thing for the inspections on HOA and commercial areas is we are appreciating, if you can, marking these areas out. Sometimes our inspectors are going to these places they have never been before. They don't know what area you're planning to take out. They've been part of no conversations. They sometimes don't even have we try our best to give them the maps and everything like that, but they haven't exactly looked at them the same way that I might in the office. If you are able to mark out your areas, the most successful way we found is with the grass paint. So essentially just kind of spray painting those areas, giving us some indication. If it's not quite certain, you can kind of use arrows to kind of show us, hey, here's the areas we're planning to take out. It's just been really helpful for us to determine what is and is not taken out. We give them whatever guidance we can, but if you want to let them know and we don't want to be on the different pages, it's a really good way for us at least to be certain. Usually for those larger HOA and commercial projects, someone will email you and say, hey, can you get this marked out? Once you have done that, we'll send an inspector out within the next couple of days and get them on the same page. So this is an example of our grass removal application. We are essentially, so we're trying, I will say, to streamline this and make it as easy as possible. You might not feel like it's very, very easy, but essentially we do have a long line of eligibility, terms and conditions. These are rules that we have found that we've had to enforce in some cases. But the actual application process, so once you get to the bottom of here, the big green button that says start application, is meant to be fairly easy. So it's going to ask you for some basic information about the property and then photos of what this area currently looks like. We really don't ask for any plans or anything like that. We have found it's an impediment to some of these projects. We are willing to say, if you're thinking about it, if you're serious about it, and you want to get a sense of what we're actually going to pay you out, we will send someone out there, we'll help you out. We're not trying to make this hard on the front end. If you are encountering any issues, that said, email me or email conservation@dwa.org, rebates@dwa.org. More than happy to help you out. More than happy to make things a little bit clearer if possible. And again, so sometimes I will say the most common issue that we have is unfortunately file size. So sometimes the thing just doesn't submit. It's usually because they're putting in a really fancy dancy new iPhone photo, and those iPhone photos are huge and our system just does not like it. So if you're able to use smaller file sizes, sometimes that's successful, or you can just email us the photos and say, hey, this thing sucks and I'll work on it for you. All right. I will say that we have plenty of time currently. So if there are any questions or anything like that, please let me know. All right. It seems like there's not, I will be around for the next half hour or so if you want to not just ask the whole room and just want to ask me personally, anything like that. If there's anything that I can help you with, please let me know. If you found this useful, let me know. If you found that there were things that might have been more productive that I didn't cover, let me know. We're really trying to improve this, make sure it's good. And my contact information is up there. That's for all of our programs. So again, thank you so much for being here. Thank you for taking time out of your day. I really appreciate all that you do and the continuing our partnership. Thank you.
Recording stopped.